I believe in miracles. I believe in miracles with all of my heart. But I believe in miracles because I believe in God. I shall never forget those long Sunday afternoons when I was a youngster, years and years and years ago, in Concordia, Missouri. No youngster ever dreaded to see Sunday come any more than I did. I just hated to see Sunday come because it was always the same. Papa never went to church. Mama went, mostly to show off, and we had our Sunday dinner, and after the dinner and the dishes were washed, Papa would say, "Well, I'm going upstairs for a nap." And Mama would say, "I think I'll take a nap too," just as though they had just thought of it, and they did it every Sunday afternoon. And there I was, a kid, full of life, full of vitality, nothing to do. And the only thing really that I did that made the time go quickly was to take my girlfriend, Maxine, who was the daughter of one of the doctors in Concordia, and we would walk the railroad track to Emma, Missouri. You didn't know there was an Emma, Missouri. Well, it's not on the map because, you see, all that's there is just, well, a creamery, Lutheran church, the Lutheran cemetery, and half a dozen houses. 3 miles from Concordia, we'd walk the railroad track to Emma. At 4 o'clock, the Missouri Pacific train, 1 engine, the mail car, 1 passenger car, would come slowly around the bend, so slowly that we'd stand on the railroad track and we'd wave, and they'd stop, and we'd get on, ride 3 miles to Concordia, get off the train like young ladies who had just arrived from Paris, you know. Oh, sure, that's been so many years ago. More years than I care to remember. But I learned something in my trip on Sunday afternoon going to Emma. I learned how to walk the rails, and I got pretty good at it. I got real good at it. I learned that to walk the rail, you had to keep your balance. If you lost your balance, it'd be sunk. I want you to know something. I'm walking the greatest rail of my life today. And I've got to keep my balance. I know it better than anyone else. I'm walking the rail. I know that according to God's word, He's winding things up, and very quickly. We're coming to the end of this dispensation. The dispensation known as the times of the Gentiles. And very soon now, we're going to have the great catching up, the rapture of the church. Following that, God, for 7 years, will keep His earthly covenants to an earthly people. the Jews. But as I read the Word of God, I find something that he said would happen in the closing hours of this dispensation. And I've got to believe his word. He'll keep his word. No man, no woman dare take issue with the word of God. And over again in his word, he tells us that two things are going to happen in the closing moments of this dispensation before the great catching up of the church. On one hand, the Word of God speaks of the great falling away. Thousands upon thousands falling away. The great deception, the coldness, the lethargy in the organized church. And in this hour we're seeing it on every hand. The world stands challenging the organized church today. And what's happening? We're not being able to meet that great challenge. The deadness, the lethargy, the formalism. What do we have to offer the youth today? We've taken away the altars. In many instances, denying the very deity and divinity of the Lord Jesus Christ, the very foundations on which Christianity was founded. On the other hand, the Word of God speaks of the great outpouring of the Holy Spirit in the closing moments of this dispensation. I will pour out of my Spirit upon all flesh. And he's promised us that in these last moments before the Holy Spirit leaves, there'll be a great outpouring, a marvelous outpouring of the Spirit, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it among the Protestants. We're seeing it among those in Catholicism. We're seeing it among men and women of every walk of life. One of the greatest outpourings of the Holy Spirit that this world has ever seen is being evidenced today in places that we never expected, among the most unlikely people. Professors, educators, priests, everywhere, in every nook and corner of the world. This glorious experience, and I believe in it with all of my heart. Remember something. The greatest gift that Jesus ever gave the church, this glorious body of believers, was the Holy Spirit. Before he went away, he wanted to give his own, his bride, his church, the greatest gift possible. And he gave that priceless gift, the Holy Spirit, for he knew better than anyone else the secret of the power in his own ministry. He understood, he knew. Peter understood. Paul understood the secret of power in their lives. I believe in that glorious experience that they had in that upper room. When the 120 were filled with the Spirit, I believe in every part of that great experience. I believe in it with all of my heart. There isn't any minister who stands in the pulpit today who believes more in that great experience of being filled with the Spirit. Call it anything that you want to. The baptism of the Holy Spirit, being filled with the Spirit. No one believes in it any more than I do. I know the secret of the power in my own ministry. I know the secret of the power of those who find the Christ as their Savior, those who are healed supernaturally, every bit of conviction comes from this glorious third person of the Trinity. But beloved, he's promised that in this closing hour there would be even a greater manifestation of the Holy Spirit. Everything that the early church experienced, everything, all the fruits, all the gifts of the Spirit are to again be returned to the church. And we're seeing that same thing happen in this hour. But beloved, because of the lack of teaching, there are those who do not know how to appropriate this glorious power that has suddenly come upon them. And the greatest tragedy of the hour is the lack of teaching in the church and among those who are receiving this glorious gift. You know, I'd give anything in the world if somehow I had the ability to stand on the highest mountaintop and proclaim the power of the Holy Spirit and the purpose in the giving of this power and this person to the believer. Because of the lack of teaching, because of the lack of the knowledge of the Word of God, there are those who are misappropriating the power of the Holy Spirit, misusing the purpose of the Holy Spirit, and are bringing a reproach on something that's very marvelous, very wonderful. Did you ever consider that one could take a match, throw it in a can of gasoline, and in a split second there'd be a terrific explosion and great damage done? One can take the same container of gasoline, put it into an automobile, and you'll go places. It all depends on how you channel it. The Holy Spirit is not a person. The Holy Spirit is not a power that you and I can use. The Holy Spirit must use the person, the vessel. That's one of the greatest secrets that I have found. A combination of common sense and the rule of the Word is what is needed today more than anything else in the world. Beloved, we need to get back to the Word of God again. Know that. If I teach you one thing and the Word says another, the Word is right. If your pastor says one thing and the Bible says another, the Bible is right. Know that. And we've got to get back to the place where we take the Word for final authority. You know, sometimes I think that we get carried away, literally swept away in some of our enthusiasm. Oh, sure. You take Peter on the Mount of Transfiguration. Oh, it was glorious. I wish I had been there. Of course, had I been there then, I could not be here now. And I think that we're living in the greatest generation for those of us who are preaching the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. On that Mount of Transfiguration, oh, when Jesus stood there transfigured before their very eyes, on one side Moses, on the other side Elijah, Peter was absolutely awed by it all. And in his ecstasy, in his enthusiasm, he was trying to conceive of some way that he could stay there forever. He was so human. Oh, Peter was so human. And methinks he thought, well, the best way to have the master in this position forever and to keep Elijah and Moses is to just build something. And in that moment he expressed his sentiments when he said, we'll build 3 tabernacles. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Oh, that mountaintop experience was wonderful. Peter should like to have stayed there forever. But remember something. It was only a very short time after that glorious experience when Jesus had come and he'd led them from off the mountaintop down the cliff, down the side of the mountain to the valley where there were sin-sick souls, men and women who needed help, humanity who needed their help. No, Peter, the Lord did not permit you to remain on the Mount of Transfiguration. The experience was glorious. The experience was marvelous. But always remember, the richest mountaintop experience in the world is only desirable as it is used for witnessing, as it is used for soul winning in the valley lands of life. Remember that. These mountaintop experiences are glorious. That upper room was wonderful. Oh, the experience of the 120 in that upper room. Methinks they should like to have stayed there forever. But were they permitted to stay there? Had they stayed in that upper room, after that the Holy Ghost had come upon them, and they were all filled with the Spirit. And I'm talking to literally thousands who have had that same upper room experience. You know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And you wish you could stay there forever and ever and never leave. But remember something. That upper room experience was given to you for a purpose. The Holy Spirit, the Spirit-filled life, is given the believer for one purpose and one purpose only: to be used for the glory of God, to be used for the salvation of souls, to be used for witnessing, not for your own pleasure, not for the glorification of yourself. The Holy Spirit will glorify just one, only one. He'll not glorify any man. He'll not magnify any human being. He'll glorify just one person. He'll magnify just one person. And that one person is Jesus, the very Son of the living God. I don't care what your experiences may have been with the Holy Spirit. I don't care how high you may have gone on the mountaintop. And there are mountaintop experiences, spiritual mountaintop experiences, that the human vocabulary cannot describe because they're spiritual. They're beyond a human description. But they're given for one purpose and one purpose only. For witnessing, for the salvation of lost souls. If you want to know whether the life is spirit-filled or not, if you want to know whether it's genuine, ask these two questions. Is it used for the edification of the church? And are souls being saved? And they were led out of the upper room. And Jerusalem was literally shaken from center to circumference through the testimony and the witnessing of the 120 who had received that marvelous experience. As Peter preached under the anointing of the Holy Spirit, 3,000 were saved in just one day. Come on down. Come on down. Turn, if you will, please, from out of the upper room. Peter and John went up together into the temple. This is after their wonderful upper room experience. It was the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour, and a certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, to ask alms of them that entered into the temple. Who, seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, asked an alms. And Peter, oh, Peter, now equipped with power, now gloriously filled with the Holy Spirit, and Peter, fastening his eyes upon him with John, said, "Look on us." And he gave heed unto them, expecting to receive something of them. And then Peter said, "Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." And he took him by the hand, lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength, and he, leaping up, stood, and he walked. Had they stayed in the upper room, this never would have happened. Never. Oh, this is glorious. And he entered with them into the temple, walking and leaping and praising God. And all the people saw him walking and praising God, giving thanks, giving glory unto the giver of every good and perfect gift. Beloved, remember again, the richest mountaintop experience in the world is only desirable as it is used in the salvation of lost souls. Come on out from the upper room. Some are staying in the upper room. You're just staying in the upper room. Come from out of the upper room. The Holy Spirit was given you for a purpose. And that purpose is for the salvation of lost souls. Come on down from the Mount of Transfiguration. come on down into the valley where there's sin-sick souls. I tell you the truth. I've had mountaintop experiences, spiritual mountaintop experiences. I've been just human enough to have wanted to never come down. I don't mind telling you that. I've had experiences, spiritual experiences, I've never told a soul. It would have been so easy to just keep going up. But had I not come down in the valley where there's sin-sick souls, I could not have helped the dope addict to find the Christ. I could not have helped the little mother whose 2 sons drowned just 4 days before Christmas. I could not have brought hope to that daddy who needed life everlasting to meet the loved ones on the other side. It's wonderful to stay in the upper room, to stay on the Mount of Transfiguration. But beloved, it's when you come down into the valley that you bring hope and life and the gospel to those who need you. It isn't easy, but it's worth